Welcome, 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 everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first session in the series. My name is Ricky Bentley. I am the Program Manager at Connecticut Land Conservation Council, or CLCC. We are the statewide umbrella organization for Connecticut's land trusts. CLCC supports your work through advocacy, funding opportunities, technical assistance, and capacity building programs like this one. Today's program is the third installment of our 7-part Anatomy of a Land Transaction series. This offers a practical overview of the essential steps involved in successful conservation acquisitions. If you're not already on our e-news list, I encourage you to sign up. It's the best way to stay informed about upcoming sessions and other CLCC programs. This afternoon, our topic is Understanding Appraisals, Choosing the Right Approach for Your Conservation Project. This session will provide land trusts and conservation professionals with practical guidance on how to scope, select, and review appraisals for land acquisition and conservation projects. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Please add your questions to the chat as they come up at any time. We'll have dedicated time for question and answer at the end. And to help preserve bandwidth, we ask that you remain muted and keep your video off until the discussion at the end. And finally, the session is being recorded. We'll share the link on our YouTube channel within the next week. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Chris Karen. Chris is founding partner of Karen and Fazio Valuation Group. It's over 35 years of real estate experience, valuing all property types. Chris earned the Certified Commercial Investment Member designation and the Appraisal Institute's MAI designation. Chris is on the Appraisal Institute's National Registry of Conservation Easement Appraisers. He's a licensed real estate broker and appraiser in Connecticut. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. We're excited to learn from you.
Oh, thank you, Ricky. Thanks for letting me talk with you all today about appraisal, something that I've been doing, for my entire career since graduating from UConn. I'm going to go over just a brief history of the appraisal profession, give you an anatomy of what an appraisal contains, talk a little bit about the Connecticut Open Space Program, which is for land trusts. Most of the appraisals we do are for the Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisitions Program. Touch a little bit about fee versus easements, different property rights. Also, IRS appraisals. You might not do IRS appraisals, but your donors have to deal with IRS appraisals, and there's a little wrinkle in the IRS regulations that you should be aware of. And I'm going to end with a case study that I like because it really, it shows what a good land transaction needs. It needs a bunch of partners to get together and to all work towards the same goal. And at the end, I'll leave plenty of room. We could go over any questions that you might have. So to start, I would normally ask, what is this? But we're on Zoom, so this is a rhetorical question. This is a bank run, right? This is the bank run in October 1929. This is really the birth of the appraisal profession. There are really two events that form the modern appraisal profession. This was the first one. Before the Great Depression in 1929, realtors were doing appraisals. There was really no qualifications. Anyone could just, hang out a shingle and do an appraisal. After the Great Depression, what had happened was a couple associations sprang up. The Appraisal Institute, originally called the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers, was one that I joined when I started. And what they did is they put together educational materials and tests and qualifications so that if you were hiring an appraiser, you would at least know that they were designated. The designation I have, MAI, originally stood for Member of the Appraisal Institute, and that's a commercial designation that says basically I've taken all the tests and taken all the coursework and have the experience necessary to appraise commercial property. So that was really the first step. The second one was the savings and loan crisis, Black Monday. I don't know if any of you all have seen The Wolf of Wall Street, but in that movie, Jordan Belfort had a job working on Wall Street in October 19th, 1987. The stock market collapsed. It was the largest single day decline in the Dow in history. In the movie, he was fired and had to go off his own and make money doing the penny stocks. But that really changed again the appraisal industry. Prior to Black Monday, uh, the stock market was in a bear market. A bull market. They were real estate. It was really a real estate boom. They had prior to that tried to encourage savings and loans to compete against each other. So they deregulated the state savings and loan industry. And so the savings and loans were taking on more risk. And what happened subsequent to that, when the bottom came out of the market, is that many savings and loans failed. About a third of the savings and loans that existed at that time, over 1,000, failed. And this was around 1987 to the early 90s. And I started this profession in 1989, right in the heart of all of this. So what happened then is the feds got involved and they instituted licensing. So before 1990, you did not have to be licensed to be an appraiser. You could have a designation, you could belong to an association, but anyone could hold themselves out as an appraiser. Today, you need to be licensed. There are two licenses in Connecticut. There's a commercial license, which can appraise anything, and then there's a residential license, which is limited to 1 to 4 family properties. So now there's licensing, there's state certification. There's also uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, and you'll hear that being referred to as USPAP, USPAP. So USPAP is a set of regulations that appraisers need to adhere to in writing real estate appraisals. Most appraisals that are done by people in my profession are done to USPAP standards because most of the appraisals are done for the finance industry. They're backed by, they're lending for banks, and the federal government backs those banks, so they require USPAP compliance. And in the state of Connecticut, they have now written USPAP and appraisal licensing into the state law. So if you're looking to get an appraisal in Connecticut and someone's holding themselves out as an appraiser, he needs to be licensed and he needs to adhere to USPAP. So what is an appraisal? It's actually very simple. The definition of an appraisal is just an opinion of value. So if you ask me, if I'm at your house for a dinner party and you ask me what the value of your home is and I tell you, that's an appraisal. So now I need to go do some things to comply to USPAP. So I'm not going to answer that question when you ask me. It's also a snapshot in time. If you hire an appraiser, they're going to tell you what the value is as of a specific date, as a specific point in time, which is important because if you get an appraisal of a property and you're working through a land transaction and then you need to apply for state grant money, if that appraisal is too old, you're going to have to get that appraisal updated. It's also can be expressed as a single point in value or a range of value. So typically appraisals are stated as a single point in value. So there is one carve out in the law for real estate appraisals, and that's for real estate agents, realtors. They are allowed to give an opinion of value for the sole purpose of getting a listing. So they could do a CMA, and that's not considered an appraisal. It doesn't have to meet USPAP, but it has to be for the purpose of giving a listing, getting a listing. If they give you a value for another purpose, they're doing an appraisal, whether they know it or not. They have to be licensed and they have to meet USPAP. So why do we need real estate appraisers? Well, if you look at the history, the Great Depression and Black Monday, it's really because not all people are honest, and also the market sometimes gets frothy and gets away from itself. So appraisers, what differs, us from maybe a realtor, is that we have to say and certify that we're a disinterested third party, that we have no interest at all in this value. Our value cannot be contingent on any money that we receive. If you get quoted a fee from an appraiser, he cannot accept the assignments if you say, look, if you value it over $5 million, I'll kick in another couple grand. You can't do that as an appraiser. So it's really to promote the public trust. That is really the whole purpose of the real estate appraisal industry. So why do we need real estate appraisers? For financing, we do appraisals for litigation. If you're doing a divorce, the assets need to be valued. Tax appeals, we do a lot of tax appeal work. We work both for municipalities and for individual property owners. Foreclosures, if a bank's foreclosing, they need to establish the value of that property. Buyers and sellers, if you're listing a property for sale or you want to buy a property, sometimes we're contacted to give an opinion of what we think the property is worth. Financial reporting, donation to land trust. So this would be an IRS appraisal. If you have a donor who wants to donate either the entire property to you or donate, do a bargain sale and donate a portion of the property to you. Let's say the property's worth 2 million and they accept a $500,000, then they're entitled to a donation for the difference in the value. And open space acquisition grant. And that's what I'll be spending most of the time on today. One thing I want to point out is that for real estate financing, it's a USPAP appraisal, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. USPAP, USPAP, USPAP. Donation to a land trust, it's USPAP to IRS standards. IRS has some specific standards that they need in an appraisal. That's in addition to USPAP. And I'm going to go over just one of those because it's a little bit quirky and you should be aware of it. Open space acquisition grant, well, that needs to be to Yellow Book standards. So that's an entirely different standard. And as you can see, most appraisals are done to USPAP standards. So relatively few appraisers do Yellow Book. It's an entirely different standard. The valuation process is very similar. If I value a property, the value is going to be the same, but the way I report it in an appraisal report is going to be different in Yellow Book than it will be for USPAP. So a little bit of a discussion on the differences between Yellow Book and USPAP. Why are there two standards? Well, as I just talked about, USPAP is born out of the banking industry. It had to do with the financial crisis, a few financial crises. And so the bank regulators went ahead and they instituted USPAP standards. That's not the same for Yellow Book. Okay, Yellow Book is the Uniform Appraisal Standards for Federal Land Acquisitions. So this is born out of constitutional case law, right? This is purpose is to promote uniformity in appraisal for real property among the various agencies acquiring property on behalf of the U.S. Okay, this is mainly for takings. Yellow Book was established because in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So that is really the where Yellow Book comes from. It's so that the government agencies, the states or the United States government, when they take your property, that they give you just compensation. And in the case of the Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisitions Grant, you're applying to the state of Connecticut, they get federal funds, and where they get the federal funds, they require a Yellow Book appraisal for those in order to release those funds. So why is it called Yellow Book? Well, because it had a yellow cover. So when it first started, it had a yellow cover. We would just call it a Yellow Book instead of the Uniform Appraisal Standards for Federal Land Acquisitions, which is a mouthful. There are a few differences between Yellow Book and USPAP. A lot of it is simply formatting differences, where they want things in the appraisal report. They have different definitions of market value, but essentially they say the same thing. The sales comparison approach is favored, and one thing that you should be aware of is when we do the sales comparison approach, if there was a sale from a land trust or from a municipality or state or federal agency, they're generally not accepted. So the land trust sales that are on the market, you generally will not use as a comparable sale in a Yellow Book appraisal. Now, there are exceptions. If you verify the sale, if you do some vigorous due diligence about the sale to determine that it was market value, the sale price represented market value, then you can use that sale. But generally, we steer away from it because oftentimes it's not based on an appraisal, or for some reason they might pay a little more, for some reason they might pay less. It might be a bargain sale. So that's why they generally don't like to accept those. The development approach is considered less reliable. I'll go into a little bit of the development approach. Just give you a sample just so you're aware of it. The reviewers really like the sales comparison approach. And these are really the only two approaches you use for valuing vacant land. The sales history, instead of a 3-year history, they want a 10-year history. And there's something that's called the larger parcel rule. I'm going to just go over this briefly. It's mainly has to do with takings, eminent domain from the government, but it also has to do with IRS appraisals. So I'm going to introduce it here, and at the towards the end, I want to touch on the IRS appraisals. And what the larger parcel rule says is that if you have more than one parcel, but it has unity of title owned by the same person or entity, they're located abutting or close to each other, and they share the same use, then that is actually what you're appraising. So even though you might be asked to appraise, a farm with 10 acres, if there's 90 acres across the street, or you may have to include that and appraise the whole thing. Again, mainly in takings and also in the IRS. This is just a brief example of the larger parcel rule. So this is a property on Commerce Road up in Brookfield, and this is typical of the properties on the road. On the left, you have a parking lot, and it serves the industrial building on the right. The industrial building cannot operate without the parking lot. So if the state comes along for the widening of Route 7 and takes that parking lot, generally, if you take a property, let's say you own a house and they take your neighbor's property to put in a highway, and you say, well, you just lowered my value. Well, it doesn't matter. You don't get anything because they didn't take your property. They took your neighbor's property. So here, they would normally claim the same thing. Okay, you took the parking lot. You really injured and damaged that industrial building because now it doesn't have parking. Without the larger parcel rule, the state could just say, well, I just took the parking lot. I didn't take the property across the street. But the larger parcel rule says that, well, there's the same ownership, they're located near each other, and it has the same use. So because of that, if we were appraising this for a taking, we would value both properties together. So that's really what the larger parcel rule says. And that's going to come in again when we talk about the IRS appraisal. So just briefly, I wanted to give you an anatomy of an appraisal, what is contained in an appraisal report. They could be pretty thick documents, but they really boil down to 3 things, 3 parts. The first part is a property identification and description. And in the first part, we're going to describe the region, we're going to describe the neighborhood, we're going to describe the subject property, talk about the zoning, and talk about taxes. Then really the core and the central part of an appraisal report is the highest and best use. The highest and best use is going to take all the information that we just presented in the first part and determine, okay, what is the highest and best use of this property? And whatever that answer is, that's how the property is valued. So if the highest and best use of the property is as residential subdivision, we value it as a residential subdivision, we get residential subdivision comps. The highest and best use is an office building, we're going to get office building comps and value it as an office building. So the highest and best use is really the core of the appraisal process. And there are really 4 things that an appraiser considers in highest and best use. So whatever use that you're proposing for the property has to be legally permissible, has to be physically possible, has to be financially feasible, and by that we mean there's a market for it, and it's the most profitable use. So if you have 3 uses, if you have a couple uses that meet the first 3 criteria, whoever's going to pay the most money, whatever use is the most valuable, that is how we value the property. Because if a property goes on the market for sale, obviously the highest bidder is going to get it. Um, then after the highest and best use, we go to the valuation section. There are three common ways of valuing. There's a cost approach, income approach, and sales approach. But for your work for land, for residential land is what I deal with mostly, for land trusts. There's really two approaches. There's a sales approach, which is similar to if you had your house appraised. They're going to take your house, they're going to find other homes, and they're going to compare and adjust those homes to your house to come up with the value of your home. So that's the sales approach. The other approach is the development approach. That's an income approach. That looks at the property from the point of view of a developer, and it really goes through to say, okay, how many lots can I get on here? What could I sell those lots for? That's my revenue. And then what are my expenses associated with that? I got to pay probably a real estate broker. I got to pay taxes, insurance. I might have to put in a road and some access ways and drainage and utilities for those lots so they could be used. And that it happens over an extended period of time. So it's a discounted sellout method that is discounted because a dollar today is worth more than a dollar 3 or 4 years in the future. So I'm going to give you just a sample of the development approach. Again, the reviewers don't like that approach as much as a sales approach. But I'll briefly give you also a sample of the sales approach. But first, let me take you through a typical highest and best use process. So this is a piece of land that's 20 acres. So the first point is what's legally permissible, right? This is 20 acres in a 2-acre zone. So I could put 10 lots on it legally. I have to check the zoning regulations. Maybe there's an open space set aside. Maybe it's 9 lots, but maybe 9 or 10 lots. You go through the next step, which is what's physically possible. If you're used to looking at topo maps, this is a GIS map of the property. You can see the pink. That is a band of wetlands that goes through the property. And on the upper left, that's sloping topography, if you could read a topo map. So you have some issues there with both steep slopes and wetlands that's going to prevent a developer from putting lots on a portion of this property. The last two criteria is what's financially feasible and what's maximally profitability. It is financially feasible to put in lots, put in homes, so that would be good. And the maximum you could put in, they had drawn up. This owner had drawn up, had a surveyor draw up a potential lot yield, and they said they could get 3 lots on it. And we checked with the town planner. The town planner said, sure, that meets the zoning regs. So there's a good probability you could get 3 lots. So that's our highest and best use conclusion. It's 20 acres, has subdivision potential for 3 lots, and then that's how we value the property going forward. Just briefly touch on the 2 different valuation methods. The first is a sales approach. This is a typical sales grid that I pulled out of a report. It's a large parcel, about 150 acres, appraised comp to 3 other properties. You might notice that the lower section has inferior and superior and similar. Yellow Book does not like using quantitative adjustments, which are plus and minuses that you typically see in a bank appraisal. They like you to bracket the property and then kind of use your judgment in arriving at a value, which is different than every other appraisal out there. The banks, the courts, everyone else wants to do a quantitative analysis, but for some reason, Yellow Book likes qualitative, so that's usually what you'll see. And really, there are 4 main factors that just I would look at out of all these factors. One is location. So when you're looking at a property, location is going to be important. The size of the property. I'm not going to compare a 2-acre lot to a 150-acre lot parcel. 2 different buyers, 2 different markets. The shape and frontage, and those 2 are related. They go together. And topography. So if you're looking at a property or someone's donating a property, these are the 4 things I would say that would stick out at you that you would pay attention to. I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One is location. Now I couldn't find a good median home price map, but this is a median household income map, which is, it correlates very well with the median home prices. And it's just to say, you probably, if you're doing 150 acres, you'd be hard pressed to find a comparable in the same town, but you want a similar town with similar demographics and similar home prices. So if you're doing a property, in Greenwich, with the far southwest corner of Connecticut, you don't want to pick comps up in Woodstock, right, which is or Thompson up in the northeast quiet corner. You want to really try to stay in the neighborhood or stay with the municipalities that have similar uh, home prices and lot prices for residential land. The other one I wanted to talk about is shape and frontage. So shape and frontage kind of go together. So this is a rectangular shaped lot, 20 acres, and you can see the street frontage. So a developer with this lot, he could just cut in lots right along the street and have very little development costs, maybe even no development costs. So it's not going to cost him a lot to develop this property. The same property, if you have minimal street frontage, in order to access and develop this with lots, you're going to have to bring in some kind of road and construct a road. So any money that he has to spend to develop the property, it's going to take off what he could afford to pay for it. This is just one curious uh, project that I had in the past, and this is about 20 acres. It's on this existing subdivision. It's a cul-de-sac with all these houses on it. So initially I thought, okay, you got all this road frontage, you're just going to cut in lots. But then I go talk to the town planner. And this municipality, which is Easton, they have a unique regulation that some other towns have that limits the amount of homes you could have off a subdivision, off a cul-de-sac. It's for health and safety reasons. They don't want fire trucks, in case there's an accident, to have 100 homes off a cul-de-sac, off a dead-end road. So there was no opportunity to access this road, even though it had frontage. So the developer, had it been developed, and we had some lot layouts done of this, would have to put in another road here to access these lots. So this is just a story of that you have to do your due diligence. Even though it looks like a slam dunk, you got to check with zoning. You got to make sure you ask the right questions. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is your development approach. Again, it's a discounted cash flow analysis. Starts with, there's a 30 lot subdivision. They're going to sell 6 lots, then 8 lots, then 8 lots, then 8 lots. This is what the lots are going to sell for. You got a sales commissions. This is your revenue. And then you have your expenses, which are taxes, insurance, and closing costs. And then your development costs. And your development costs are going to be, for this property, it had no approvals in place. You have to get an attorney to take it through the development process. You got to get engineering done to do the subdivision layout. And then you have to build the roads and the infrastructure. And there's also risk, right? If an engineer says you could get 30 lots on this, or an owner says you could get 30 lots, well, they're not the determinant, right? This is a give and take with the planning and zoning board, and it never goes up. You could go to P&Z with the 30 lot subdivision, and they may cut it down to 29, 28, or just deny you entirely. So there's risk of losing lots. There's also risk that the subdivision would not be approved. So with this approach, we would typically not do the development approach because it is so speculative, unless we had a subdivision map that was prepared by an engineer who knows the local zoning, and that we talked to the planning office of the town, and they said, yeah, that has a reasonable probability for approvals. Under those limited circumstances, we would do a development approach, but typically, most of the properties, we simply would do a sales approach. But I thought you should know what it is because you may see it in the appraisal. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Connecticut Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisitions Program. So this is paid for with taxpayer money. So they like public access to the land so the public could use it. It could be in fee, or it could be a conservation easement. And a conservation easement could have public access, but you could also have one with quiet enjoyment that doesn't allow the public, but then you're probably not getting the state grant. has to be appraised to federal standards, which is the Yellow Book standards, and it preserves land for passive recreation and land in its natural scenic state. Passive recreation is in contrast to active recreation, such as a golf course. They're not going to give you money to buy land and install a golf course. There are 3 eligible sponsors: municipalities, land trusts, and the water company, and they generally leverage money to preserve the most acreage. And the funds are awarded using a point system. As far as leveraging the money, it puts kind of Lower Fairfield County at a disadvantage because it takes more money to preserve less acreage in Fairfield County than it does throughout the rest of the state. And their score sheet's available online, but they typically order points for administrative and community support. Who is the sponsor? Have they done this before? Are you providing public access, environmental justice and equity, and climate change and natural resources? Are you doing things to mitigate climate change? Do you have wetlands on there? Things of that nature. The 2 types of interests that we typically appraise for the open space grant. One is a fee simple interest and one is a conservation easement. I just wanted to briefly introduce both of those concepts in case you're not aware of them. Fee simple, and we were taught in appraisal school to think of it as a bundle of sticks for some reason. Fee simple is the absolute ownership unencumbered by any other interest or estate. So that is the entire bundle of rights if you own fee simple ownership. You have the right to build on the property. You have the right to occupy, sell. You can lease the property. You can mortgage the property. This is what you typically have when you buy a house. You have the entire bundle of rights. And it's subject only to these governmental powers, right? You have the entire bundle of rights, but the government has the right of taxation. It has the right of police power, which is essentially zoning. They could zone your property to restrict uses. They have the right of eminent domain. They could take all or a portion of your property, but they have to give you just compensation. And the last one is a sheet, and that is if you die and you don't have any heirs and you don't have a will, then the government has the right to take your property and sell it and keep the money. So you compare that to a conservation easement, and here you have the bundle of rights broken apart. The grantor, you can see his bundle smaller. If you're granting a conservation easement to a land trust as an owner, you're losing most of your value, or you're selling most of your value. The grantee, who has the development rights, they maintain most of the value. In Connecticut, it's really 2 basic values to land. If you could develop it as residential, it has substantial value. If you can't develop it, it really has limited value, whether you're using it for hunting, whether you're using it for hiking, whether you're using it for farming. Most of the farming in Connecticut really doesn't have much business value. There are exceptions, right? There are tobacco lands that are in the Connecticut River Valley, which are very fertile and are profitable, but most of the farming that's done in Connecticut is not very profitable and doesn't really generate any more income than if you would just leave it vacant and hunt on it. We do a lot of work for the Farmland Preservation Trust, for Farmland Preservation Program, so we do quite a bit of farms in Connecticut. And the definition is an interest in real property restricting future land use to preservation, conservation, wildlife habitat, or some combination of those uses. So when you give the development rights away and you can no longer put a house on it, you're giving away most of the value. And you could donate that value and get an IRS tax deduction, or you could sell that conservation easement. The one thing that happens when you sell the conservation easement, you have sold the development rights, but you still own the property. You still own the underlying fee subject to that easement. So you can still walk your property, you can enjoy your backyard or whatever. A brief slide on the appraisal process. So if you're a land trust, when do you contact an appraiser? So first, you could order the Yellow Book appraisal first and give it to the seller, right? If you see a piece of property, call an appraiser, order a Yellow Book appraisal, give it to the seller. Not recommended because really it's a take it or leave it offer that could damage the relationship with the seller. And also, these appraisals have limited shelf life. So it may take you longer than 6 months, say, to close on that deal and apply for the open space grant. The grant rounds are not constant. They come in, certain periods of time. So there's certain times when you need to have the appraisal done. Second one is contact the appraisal last for a grant submittal. This happens, quite a lot. The problem with that would be that the appraisal may not support your purchase price, which means either you have to renegotiate the purchase price, or come up with more equity out of pocket. This is what I would recommend, that if you have an issue, you have a property you're looking at, is contact the appraiser in a two-stage appraisal process. So first, an appraiser could look at it and he could give you a verbal, or she can give you a verbal value, saying, well, this is where I think the value would come up if I wrote an appraisal. You're not paying for the whole Yellow Book because you may not end up closing on it, so that'll save you some money. But at least if a Yellow Book appraisal is written and it's a reasonable, not a lot of time has gone by and the market hasn't changed a lot, where the value is going to come out. And you also have an opportunity to develop a relationship with the landowner by negotiating that value. And then stage two, if everything goes right and you have a contract, then you could order the Yellow Book appraisal. And for Yellow Book, you're going to need a review appraiser also. So finally, I wanted to talk about some IRS appraisal guidelines, just because you may have donors that are looking to donate and they need an IRS appraisal. Just something that you should be aware of, and it has to do with that larger parcel rule. So here's an example in Lower Fairfield County. You can see the shaded property. There's a house on it, and then there's a red line, and then you have some extra land back here. This is excess land. So this property was 4.5 acres. It's in a 2-acre zone. There's an 8,000 square foot home on it. And what the owner wanted to do was to gift the 2 acres to the land trust. And the 2 acres had a value of about $1 million. So you would think on the face of it, well, the value of my gift is $1 million. But that's not the case with the IRS because of this larger parcel. So the before value, when valuing this property, I can't value just this property, the 2 acres. I have to value the 4.5 acres together as part of a larger parcel. Same unity of use, same owner, they abut each other. So the home is $3 million, the 2 acres were $1 million, the before value is $4 million. So in these, we do a before and after approach. We value it before the donation, and then we value it after the donation. And the difference is the value of the donation. So afterwards, what do we have? We have the same house on 2.5 acres, but now this house abuts open space land, right? Before, it could be a house here, but now it open space land. So it increases the value of this home. So after value, the home's increased in value 10%. And this is what the IRS wants you to recognize. So the value of the gift is $700,000. And that makes sense because if I'm giving something away, but by doing that, I get a benefit from that, then it really should be the difference. That should be the gift. Here's a more clear-cut example. This is a property down in Darien. There was a house, and then they had another lot that faced the ocean, that faced the Long Island Sound. So you can see here that if the homeowner, if they developed a house on this property, it would obstruct his view. But if he donated the land, that the house that abuts it would increase in value. So that's what the IRS wants you to capture in a gift appraisal. Here's one that wasn't so clear cut. This was a property that was about 20 acres, and across the street, the same owner had a house. So in the appraisal, we had to recognize that there was a larger parcel here because they, same ownership, both residentially zoned, they were separated by a road. But we determined that really this property didn't increase in value. This is set back from the road, didn't really have a view of this conservation easement area. So this property benefit would not be any different than, say, any of the other benefits of anyone else having conservation easement land, conserved land in the neighborhood. So we did not bump up the value of the remainder on this one, but it is something that had to be considered in the IRS appraisal. So when we did this job, we had to tell the owner we had to appraise the house also, and that gave him pause, and then we had to explain this whole concept to him, which is why I'm introducing it to you. And not every appraiser does IRS appraisals, and it's because of this rule. There was some funny business going on, mainly with facade easements, and the IRS finally passed guidelines that said the appraiser may be subject to a penalty if they determine that there's a substantial or gross valuation misstatement. So generally, if I do an appraisal and they don't agree with the value, there's really nothing personally that can be done to me, except for an IRS appraisal. They can come back at me personally uh, if we do a overstatement or gross valuation misstatement. So some appraisers just stop doing IRS appraisals entirely. So finally, I'm just gonna, we have one case study that I'd like to go through, and I like this case study because it kind of incorporates uh, it kind of incorporates the partnerships and what you might have to go through and the hoops that you have to jump through when going through when you're preserving land. Now, this is a complicated one. I think most of the ones I see are fairly straightforward, but there's always some wrinkles involved. This is treetops. This is down in the Stanford Greenwich line. So this is 110 acres. It's improved with a 12,500 square foot mansion. 70 acres are in Greenwich and 40 acres are in Stanford. Now this mansion, Treetops Estate, was built by Libby Holman. So Libby Holman, she was a provocative torch singer and a stage actress back in the 20s. She invented the strapless dress. She dated men, women, bunch of men. There was a story on her husband's 21st birthday. She went down south for a birthday party. Her husband ended up getting shot and killed. Uh, she was brought up on charges, and her lover at the time was brought up on charges. Uh, Ended up that they dropped the charges because the man who was killed, her husband who was killed, was part of a very rich tobacco farming family, and they did not want the publicity, so they dropped the charges. So she built this huge estate with all the money that she earned uh, down in the Stanford Greenwich line. It's a sad ending. She ended up committing suicide in the garage of her estate. Uh, and then eventually, Champion International acquired the property as a corporate retreat. So Champion had the property as a corporate retreat, and then they weren't really using it anymore, so they offered to sell it to Stanford. Now, this is something I hear often, since there's no pressure from a developer, Stanford said, no, we don't want anything to do with this property. We're not going to buy it. And they were really being offered a very good terms to buy this property. So they didn't take the offer. In 2000, International Paper buys Champion. So International Paper is down in Memphis, Tennessee. They don't care about Stanford, Connecticut, and they're trying to sell some assets. So what is International Paper's motivation to sell Treetops? Well, it's really to preserve shareholder value and sell to the highest bidder, right? That's their job as a corporation. Um, Whereas Champion was a neighbor of the town and they were willing to give it to Stanford. International Paper didn't care about Connecticut or Greenwich. This property abutted the Mianus River Gorge Preserve. It's in New York and Connecticut. The Mianus River flows into the Long Island Sound. It's one of the largest old growth hemlock forests in the Northeast. And this was purchased initially 60 acres in 1953. This was the first land project of the Nature Conservancy. And the motivating event, and there's often a motivating event in these land transactions, was that in 1953 they had proposed flooding the land with a dam and then putting in a housing development. And that's what really got the neighbors motivated, and they ended up purchasing it back then. Today it's 791 acres in fee and 226 acres conservation easement. So International Paper prices the property at the market, cash, no contingencies. Neighbors don't want this property to be sold. So they want to assemble this property with the Mianus River Gorge. So the Trust for Public Land gets involved, and they assemble a coalition to preserve the property. The coalition includes the town of Stamford, the city of Stamford, the American Water Company, the Greenwich Land Trust, the Stamford Land Trust, and Connecticut Deep. So again, this is partnerships. A lot of the deals that I see go forward are done with partners. TPL offers 11.5 million with contingencies. They've excluded the mansion. They said they need to do a capital campaign. The towns need to do referendums, and they need to do a grant application to the state. So what does International Paper do next? Do they take the offer from TPL, or do they sell it to a developer? Well, they signed a contract with the New York developer, $15 million cash, no contingencies. So what had happened was TPL put in this offer. They thought it was going through. Then one of their members was at a dinner party and overheard somebody from International Paper say, "Oh yeah, we got a binding offer from a developer. We're going to develop this property." So the neighbors are going crazy. TPL and the neighbors, they call the congressman and they say, "Look, we really want to preserve this land. It's a central piece in Stamford and Greenwich. Can you help us out with this? Because International Paper is going to sell it to a developer." So the congressman goes to International Paper and he's like, I'm members of these committees here, the Finance Committee. What can I do to help International Paper? So that's really another way of saying, look, if you sell this to a developer, you're not getting anything that you want from me. So turns out that into that land trust, it turns out that International Paper does end up selling it to TPL. But really, the moral here is that land trusts cannot compete with developers. Developers can do quick closings. They could offer no contingencies. They could offer a higher purchase price often, and they could often purchase it contingent upon approvals, which enables them to take some of the risk out of the deal and then offer a price that's over and above raw land value. And Tim Northrup, who was at TPL at the time, this is his quote: "Your best opportunity to preserve land is before it hits the open market." Obviously, if Stamford would have purchased the property for a song, none of this would have happened. So they rip up the contract to the developer. Developer sues International Paper for non-performance, but they give TPL 100 days to save treetops. So is treetops funded by Connecticut Deep program? Well, one of the issues is it's 11.5 million for 100 acres. It's over 100,000 an acre. They could buy tons more land in other parts of the state for that money, but they do give some cash. Connecticut Deep gives 3 million. American Water Company chips in. Greenwich and Stamford chip in, and there's a public campaign with the land trusts. One other interesting point is that both the Stamford and the Greenwich Land Trust had to run campaigns because people in Greenwich wouldn't give to Stamford, and some people in Stamford didn't want to give to Greenwich. So they wanted to, it's just an interesting aside. So the Mianus River Gorge was preserved, this was preserved as part of the Mianus River Gorge Preserve. They purchased a fee simple interest in 90 acres. They purchased a conservation easement over 18 acres that surrounded the mansion. So if the mansion was there, they could not develop it further. And the conveyance was, and there was an order of this conveyance. Connecticut Deep got the fee simple estate. American Water Company got an easement over the river. Greenwich and Stamford, the municipalities got a conservation easement, and also the land trusts also acquired a conservation easement. So when they were putting out money, they had to get something in return, and that's what ended up happening. All right, so I hope you found that enjoyable and educational. So I'm open for any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, if folks want to come off video and ask questions or put them in the chat, whichever is easier. Yeah, Billy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm having trouble getting my mind around the division of value between um, the fee simple and the conservation easement. And you said that the bundle of sticks is larger in the case of the conservation easement. And the reason I'm trying to get my mind around that is to look at the difference between, from the point of view of the property owner seller, of a choice between a donation um, of the land and a donation of a conservation easement, or the sale of the land, or and the donation of a conservation easement, which after tax is X, and the typical, and I know you're going to say there are no typical ratios of one to the other. And in approaching a property owner who wishes to conserve their property, and you're starting to have an initial conversation with them, and they say, well, what's the value? What's the value? And I say, look, I can't tell you the value, and I can't promise you the value, but there are two routes. You can donate a conservation easement, or you can sell the conserved part of the property. And what are the typical ratios of those in rural places?
Yeah, so one of the questions in the messages also is more profitable to whom, the developer, the town. Uh, Really, any piece of vacant residential land in Connecticut, highest and best use is for residential subdivision. There really isn't another use you could put on there that's permitted. You can't put a hotel on there. You can't put it's always going to be residential subdivision. Um, and most of the value is in putting a house on that, or homes on those. So just think of a lot. You have a lot, I can put a house on it, it has a value. If I can't put a house on it, most of the value is gone. What can I do as a buyer? I could walk it. I could maybe, farm it. I could go hunting on it, ride my ATV on it. None of those are as valuable as a house. So really, whenever we look at these, it was from the point of view of the developer. It's from a point of view of what would they pay for it. And the rule of thumb that I use when I talk to people is there actually is usually, it could be 80 to 90% of the value could be the development rights. And the main difference for the owner would be if I'm selling it in fee, I no longer own that property. If I'm selling the development rights, I still own the property. I still can walk the property. If it's vacant and I was doing stuff before, walking my dog on it, I could still walk my dog on it. The only thing I can't do is put a house on it. So often, especially with farms, it's a really good deal for the farmers. We find that second generation, third generation maybe doesn't want to farm anymore, but you have the opportunity to get most of the money, yet still allow it to be a farm in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Susan, I know you had a question in the chat. Um, what does it cost to get a verbal value range? Does the appraiser have to physically walk the property to get a verbal value range or a yellow book appraisal?
Yes, so to get a verbal value, the appraiser does not need to walk the property. To do a yellow book appraisal, we need to walk the property. We need to offer the property owner an opportunity to accompany us on that walk, which often is a good thing. because the property owners have opinions and they want to at least get those opinions out to somebody. So it's good to walk the property with them if they want to, or at least talk to them. Uh, Sometimes I'll hop in their truck, they'll take me around and talk to me about the property, and that often they like that outlet. Uh, yeah, so as far as the cost, I can't get into the cost, but nowadays uh, the topo maps, the GIS maps that really show the important factors that I was presenting before in the sales approach, the location of the property, the shape and the frontage of the property, and the topography of the property. Uh, those things could be seen remotely from information that's available online in most communities in Connecticut. So I could get an idea without walking the property. I may need to talk to the local zoning officer to see if there's any little quirks in the town. Uh, but yeah, you could get a stage one verbal without physically walking the property. But you will need to walk it for the yellow book because they're going to want pictures too. They're going to know where your pictures are taken from. Those are some things that are required in yellow book.
An opportunity again that I'll just plug. CLCC has our transaction assistance grant program, which can help with the cost of getting an appraisal. I'll put the link in the chat. Are there any other questions?
I see we have a minute, and if no one else does, I have one, but if someone else has one. So with development costs and house building costs apparently soaring, um, do you see any early indication of lower land prices? Because in theory, the sum of the total of thinking of a project is, oh, I can develop it and I can build stuff. But since the building cost is going up and there's sticker price for the overall package, do you see land values, particularly rurally, in non-farm contexts, either stable or even declining?
I don't see them declining, mainly because the home prices are also going up. So your cost to build has gone up, but in Connecticut, I also do revaluations, municipal revaluations every 5 years. We do them, and for different communities. And we're seeing from 5 years ago to today, when we're doing 2025, we are comparing it to 2020. A lot of these communities, their homes are going up 50 to 60%, mainly due to COVID. Uh, there was a really strong uptick in the market during COVID. A lot of people in New York were moving up here, and that's all over the state. That's not just in close to New York. But you are correct that the value of the homes went up, the value of the materials went up, the lot prices didn't go up as much. So you weren't seeing land prices go up 50 to 60%, but you were seeing home prices, and that had a lot to do with the value of the price of the materials and labor.
Thank you.
Right, is there any other questions for Chris? Oh, here we go. Philosophically, why is there such a narrow view of highest and best value? Um, Benefiting a developer versus benefiting the town, existing residents, unhoused people, countless living organisms. In some cases where conservation leads to reduced costs for town.
Yeah, so as an appraiser, an appraisal is an opinion of value. So I'm trying to mirror the market and say, okay, if this property were put on the market, what would it sell for? Uh, you know, if someone's buying the property for open space because they have some, you know, great goals of, preserving open space, the countless living organisms, benefiting the community, if they have that goal to buy that property, they're going to have to outbid the developer in order to get that property. So towns will buy property, and land trusts who have those goals, they will buy properties, but they have to outbid the developer because if that property goes in the market, the most profitable use of that property would be for a residential developer, and that's what it's going to sell for, unless they're taken out of the market by having a conservation easement on there. So I hope that answers your question. Philosophically, I'm right in alignment with you. That's why I love doing this land trust work. It's a good, I get to go out there and hike in open space and enjoy nature, and I get paid for it. And the end goal is preserving the open space land. So I'm all in alignment. But from just from a market perspective, if I'm trying to mirror the market and see what this property is going to sell for, the highest bidder is going to be, in the case of a residential piece of land, is going to be a developer. Now, some people, will buy estate properties, a house with a whole bunch of excess land, and they don't intend on developing it, but they're still outbidding a developer who's good. So they need to raise their price to the highest and best use price.
All right. Well, if there's no final questions, say thank you again to Chris for excellent presentation. Oh,
Thank you,
wait.
Ricky.
And if for all you folks, we'll be here same time, same place next week for a session on surveys. So hope to see you there. Reach out if you have any questions, and I'll send you the recording shortly with some attached resources. Take care, everyone.